So welcome everybody to today's presentation, Integrating AI into Writing, a Teacher's Guide. We came up with this topic in response to faculty who, there's a lot of papers being written at the college level, and we wanted to, given that AI is a thing, we wanted to make sure that we address this specific topic. We have an esteemed guest with us today. I'm pointing to her as if she's to my left on stage. And that's Paula Jobalise. Paula, do you want to introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I teach in the PhD in Health Science program in the College of Health Sciences. I've been teaching the professional writing course there for the last 7 years. This year, all brand new.
Yep, you've done a little revision this year, there's no doubt. And Emily, you're joining us as well, if you want to give a quick intro.
Sure. Hi, I'm Emily Rush. I'm an instructional designer and self-proclaimed AI enthusiast, and I'm excited to join you all today.
Okay, and I, of course, am Peg Checky, with an instructional designer with City, who just tags along for the ride on most of these things. Our agenda for today, really quickly, is a brief recap of what AI can do. How can we use AI in writing? How can we help our students to use AI effectively and responsibly? And then, most importantly, how would you use it in your class? We're going to hopefully cover some of that, tips and tricks. Learning objectives, we want to explore how AI can enhance the writing processes, provide feedback, and improve overall writing skills. I think Dr. Cooperman in our last presentation was talking about raising that foundational baseline with writing, something we all wish we could do. We're also going to hopefully guide you through the effective integration of AI into any of your writing. And then finally, we want to give you some practical ways to use AI to support your students' writing endeavors. So lots of, just lots of ways that we can use these new tools effectively and efficiently. Before we do that, though, we wanted to talk a little bit about why writing is so hard. And there's a bunch of reasons. I'm going to let Paula Jo start us off with that, and just what if your student, especially on the PhD level, in the STEM field, why is it so hard for them to write?
I think I'll just talk about my students. I think, I think as faculty, we sometimes look at students and get irritated or upset with them because we're like, oh, why don't they know how to write by now, type of a thing. But the reality is, I think they're writing for different audiences. So they may know how to write at one level, but once they come up even through the graduate level or into the PhD level, the writing is very different. The audience is very different. And so writing becomes a little bit more difficult for them because they aren't used to writing in that vein, right? And so I think we, as faculty, what I've learned over the years is I need to step back and not lay blame all the time on the students of why they aren't able to write. It's just that they're now writing, the expectations have changed for them. And that's why it's our role then to teach them how to write at this level.
Right, and they're mostly by themselves, right? If you think about it, their writing is a solitary activity. You don't write in collaboration often. And even when you do, your section of it is always going to be your section. And so it's really hard when you're in that little box all by yourself to get the juices flowing. For me, anyway, as a writer. Emily, what about you? Do you have some thoughts? And I want audience, I really want to hear your perspectives too on this topic. If you have some ideas, throw them out there, please. Put them in the chat, jump in with your mic.
I think writing can be a really vulnerable process in the sense that you're putting your ideas out there and they're very much subject to criticism. I know, having going through doctoral research myself, that sometimes I would think about the wrong audience and I would write and think about my advisor's going to read this and they're going to hate it. So I would like almost be paralyzed in the writing process with that in mind. So it can be a little bit scary, I think, to try and share your ideas.
Anybody else want to chime in with other ideas of why writing is so hard? You guys have all written, and you've certainly all had students that you asked to write, I'm sure. Any thoughts from the audience?
I think one of the reasons
I just joined, so I don't know what anybody else said. This is Jan Odiaga.
Hi, Jan.
Hi. I need to write with a fresh mind.
Mhm.
So I can't oh, I have 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there. No, I have to really allocate a block of time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I know other people are good at pick up and put down, but I first I have to think. That
Yep.
also takes time. Um, and then, then then I think, and then another time I can write, and then I can think and write. So for me, it's a slow process. It's not, other people love it and it just flows from them. But for me, it's thoughtful and takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. I tend to I have to start from the beginning each time too. Like I cannot start writing
Yeah.
from the middle of the document. I have to go back to the beginning, read the whole thing through, pick up my thoughts. Where was I?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Catherine, you were going to jump in. What did you have to offer?
Well, I think what Paula Joe said about writing at a different level is really important because I do think the more you read, the better you write. And you
Mhm.
can tell, people who've come up being readers since first grade write it a little differently. And when
Yeah.
they get to graduate school, that's all a new level of reading. They haven't read it, that they've not read research before. They've not
Mhm.
read the kind of scholarly works that they now have to write. And I think a lot of them, just encouraging them to read more will help improve their writing skills because then they see this is how a literature review is written. This is, so I
Yes.
think in many ways that's been helpful as I watch students writing evolve because they just read more. So as the longer they're in that graduate program.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
Go ahead.
I just want to say too, as a DNP, we are not really taught to write versus the people who are in the doctoral programs. They are taught to write,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
we are not. So the learning curve for the DNP, I think, is large, unless you're always doing case studies. But when you're faculty, you may not have, you're editing everybody's DNP projects and working with them and their writing. So you don't really have much left over.
I would,
Absolutely. And editing in and of itself, we have to be careful not to run over time. So Emily and Paula Joe, make sure we keep me, give me the smack. But I mean,
Right.
writing is a skill that takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of time to develop. And the more you do it, the better you become at it. But it also requires that you take the time and the effort to develop those skills and learn what's appropriate here and what's appropriate there and whatnot. So couple of comments in the chat as well. Writing academically is very different. And again, getting in your head and overthinking. Yep, right there too. I think at the end of the day, the big fear linking this to AI is that we won't learn how to write if we use AI, right? I mean, does everybody kind of have that sense that not everybody believes that, but at least you've heard that argument, yes?
I don't worry that they're not going to learn how to write. And quite honestly, if they are going to write for publication, there are so many editors that their work will pass before it ever gets to, print that
Mhm.
I'm not all that. I mean, I want them to be able to write, in a nutshell. What I worry about is that they won't learn how to think
Yeah.
because a lot of writing is thinking. I think a couple of people have made that point that you take some time to think and I think some of the best thinking people do and students do is in the process of formulating a response or an answer. They really have to think about it. If they can plug the cues into a generator to get it artificially generated, there's no need to have to think. And that's my concern, is that they'll not learn how to think.
I want to, in response to that was a perfect segue. I want to bring up this quote from this article. Does the use of AI to create academic research papers undermine researcher originality, which lends itself to the whole thinking piece? And the highlighted line is, in the discussion section of this paper, we argue that if a researcher uses AI-based manuscript writing support to draft the discussion section, this does not necessarily diminish the researcher's originality. Rather, AI support may allow the researcher to perform creative work in a more refined fashion. So hopefully what we're going to get to with our presentation today is the idea that we're going to give them this tool and you're going to show, or these tools, and you're going to show them how to use the tools properly so that they're incorporating their own originality, and they're actually thinking more than they would have been before. That's the goal. So let's just jump into the next slide. Questions up to this point? Anybody want to jump in with any closing thoughts on what we were just talking about? Jan, were you going to say something?
Me, no. Thanks for
Okay.
asking.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula Jo, and we're going to have some audience participation time, I think.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we had several questions for you, is how you would approach AI and we're specifically talking about assignments where your students have to write, obviously. I know that when AI first started out, we all started thinking like, oh my gosh, we're going to change all these assignments so they're not writing, right? So they can't use AI. But, that's just not feasible. That's just not, appropriate. So how are you going to approach AI in the writing assignments that you have in your courses? So what we want you to do is just think of a course that you teach, just one. We're going to start small. You need to start small. To think of one course and one assignment, a writing assignment, and where you envision how AI could have a role with that. Looking at the learning process, what do you want your students to know about AI and how to use AI? And then eventually, which tools are you going to use for what? So just to start to marinate some of those questions in your mind and in your head. And we're going to kind of go through some of those and help you feather out some of those thoughts. I think that's what we're going to do. So Peg, I think we're going to go right into the next slide.
That's perfect.
We're going to help them get through some of this. So again, how can we use AI in the graduate level of writing, or even the undergraduate level, as some of the programs we have here at Rush? And I think, again, the initial worry was that students were just going to use AI as a solution. And it's kind of our role, I believe, as a faculty, that we really need to reframe that thinking, and that AI is really just another tool for them to improve their writing or help them to write with. So this is how I'm just kind of taking you on my little journey that I went through this past year. So the first thing was, like many of you potentially, it was a little anxiety provoking, right? When I first started learning about AI, oh my gosh, I teach this writing class. How am I going to do all of this? And so I think a lot of faculty expressed fear and anxiety with the use of AI. So one of the things that we often do when we are anxious or have a lot of fear is we got to get more knowledgeable, right? And knowledge will take away or reduce that fear and anxiety. So the first thing I started doing was a lot of research. I went to a education conference where AI was the highlight, and I went to several sessions about AI use in higher ed. I started doing a lot of reading. I started listening to podcasts, reading blogs, all those types of things. The caution here is that I didn't do this with AI in healthcare or AI within my profession. I did it with AI in education and in higher education. I went to those conferences and those journals and that type of thing. And I think that broadens it out, and that really helped me to see that, we're all facing this together a little bit. There's a lot of great resources out there. Obviously, City is our most fantastic resource we have here at Rush. In terms of, they have the T3 in Canvas that has an AI component. They put together the AI literacy module that I've used. It's in all my courses now. And then I do something that could be considered like cheating maybe on City. I feel like I'm like cheating on my husband. Is that I go to other universities' websites and I look at their teaching centers and their writing centers, and I look to see what they have out there on AI. And that's helped to balance things a little bit for me too. But again, I keep going back to City. Emily is like my Apple Genius bar, is what I just told her the other day. She is truly the guru of AI here at Rush, and she has been extremely helpful as a resource for me. And Peg and the other instructional designers help to balance that and show me then how to use it within my curriculum. So, really make sure we use those resources. And then the last thing I did is I reflected, right? I then took some time to let it all marinate. And it took a couple of months. It probably took more than a couple of months to just kind of marinate all this stuff that was going on in my head. And I think that's okay. I think initially we were all panicked. We had to do this right away. This was a crisis. I don't think that anymore. I think we just need to slow it all down. We have time to slow it down, and we just need to reflect. And I think that really has helped reduce my own fear and anxiety as I started to approach my course, this particular course. So how I approached my course, the first thing I did was I created a statement for my syllabus. And this was actually before the university AI policy was approved. I had come across a document that was Creative Commons, and it gave all of these different syllabi statements about AI. And then I picked and chose and crafted my own statement. What were my beliefs about AI, how I wanted my students to use AI, what the responsibilities my students had to use when they were using AI. And then as part of that statement, I also included a statement about how this is all in flux. We're all learning. And so things may change. There may be changes in the syllabus. There may be changes in these assignments based on the fact that AI is evolving. So that was also part of my statement on my syllabus. And that's still on all of my syllabi today. The AI literacy module that I mentioned before that City created, I actually now have that embedded in every single one of my courses. It's in Canvas Commons. And I actually now include that in my writing course. That's part of an activity to get the students then to use that into my courses. And then probably the best thing I did was I talked to my students, right? On day one, the very first thing I did, my program is fully online, asynchronous. So on day one of the discussion board, I posted questions to the students. Have you used it? What do you like about it? Are you afraid of it? Are you supportive of it? Tell me a little bit about your experiences with AI. And we had a discussion about it. And I think that's really critical, just open up the dialogue with the students. And I was just honest with them too. Hey, I really haven't used it that much, either. We're going to figure this out together. So I think the student and dialoguing with the students is absolutely critical. So this was some of the things that some of my students reported on day one. Most of my students had not used AI at all. The majority of my students also thought it was unethical, that it was plagiarism, that it was cheating, but yet they were kind of also excited or interested or not really opposed to learning about it. And so that gave me some valuable information of where they were and how to kind of proceed along as I continued into the course. So these are some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself. This is what I started asking myself as well about putting AI into my course. Where was I going to put it? Was I going to incorporate it in class activities, which for me are like mostly on the discussion boards? Was I going to put it in assignments? Were they going to be low risk versus high risk assignments? Was I going to use it throughout the term? Was I only going to use it in certain parts of the term? Is it going to be required? I had one student who just said, I do not want to use AI. I mean, she just blatantly said, I am not going to use AI. But so should I be requiring them to use it, especially if it's included in an assignment? And those, again, these are just questions I had. I don't necessarily have all these answers, but these were things that started, again, kind of bubbling up in my head. Was I going to require them to use specific tools? Could they only use ChatGPT? Was I going to let them choose their own tools? Am I going to learn how to use all these tools? Again, thinking of those things. And then if I placed AI into assignments, do I need to put a category in the rubric about their use of AI? Am I going to grade them on how well they used AI? Again, don't necessarily have all the answers. And even though we're in week 11 of my course, I'm still kind of figuring a lot of these things out. But I think these are important questions to sit there and reflect on as you're determining whether or not to even put AI in a course. So this is how I ended up putting AI into the writing course. So again, I'm not done in person, so I have discussion boards. So the first thing I did was that week one, I gauged their comfort level with AI. So that gave me a lot of great information of where they were. On week 4, we have an assignment where they have to do a literature search and literature review. So on the discussion board, I assigned each student to review an AI tool. And Emily helped me with this. She's the one that showed me all these AI tools that were really good for searching for literature and reviewing literature and summarizing PDFs, those types of things. So we actually did like a review session of these different AI tools. And they had to look at the prompts and what results they got, the ease of use, and then whether or not they would recommend them to their fellow classmates. In week 5, then I brought AI back into the mix, and I asked them now, because we were further along in writing this paper, would they use AI to write that paper? Are they going to use it to paraphrase? Are they going to use it to create citations? Are they going to use it to correct their grammar? Those types of things. And I just wanted to get a sense, are they going to use it? Are they not going to use it? And then I actually offered them the different AI tools that they could use if they wanted to. Grammarly, Quillbot, Scribr. Again, Emily, tremendous help from getting me to this point of understanding what some of these tools can do. And so again, here, this was more of a discussion about their use of AI and getting them comfortable about AI. And then these were 2 assignments where I actually have AI in the assignments. These are embedded in the assignments. One of the first assignments in the course is they construct an outline. They had to choose their own AI generator, so whatever tool they wanted to use, to create the outline for them. And then they could either use that outline, use a different outline, use parts of those outline, whatever they wanted to do. But every time I ask the students to use an AI, they always have to tell me these 4 things. What tool did they use? What was their prompt? I want the exact words of their prompt. Give me a brief statement about how their experience was, and then how much or what percentage of that AI response did they incorporate into that assignment. So they always have to tell me those 4 things every time they use AI. And then the second assignment, which we have not done yet, which will be coming up in week 14, is their paper will be now completed. And we're having all the papers submitted into a program called My Essay Feedback. It's an AI program. It's like a peer review. But the nice thing about My Essay Feedback is I set the parameters on what I am asking this program to give feedback on. But the students have to go into this AI and submit their papers, and then they get the feedback on the paper. And again, they have to give a review of how they responded to the review of this program. And then the last thing I did, this is the last talking point I have here, is I created all these videos. So I started wanting to really delve my hands into some of these AI tools. And so I started creating these short 1 to 3 minute videos demonstrating how to use the tool. So I did a Chat GPT and a Bard and compared the 2. I did a Chat PDF. And then PDF Gear is actually an application. It's not on the web that I really like a lot. But I just, again, it's kind of selfish. I wanted a chance to play with the tools and use them, but it also kind of helped the students in that they didn't have to go out into YouTube and another source to try and figure out how to use these AI tools. And hopefully they trusted me in my review of these tools as well. And so that's why I created these videos. The last thing I have here is, so I do a midterm feedback. It's a qualitative feedback survey that I do at midterm. I did not ask any questions about AI on this feedback survey, but this is now students who were saying there's no way they were going to use this. I don't, it's unethical. They are now asking me to push them to use AI, right? They want to start using AI and get comfortable with it. So we've come a long way in 11 weeks. Which I'm feeling pretty good about, but I still think we have a long way to go as well. Are there any, and I don't know if we have time for questions now or concerns, or we keep moving on.
We can make time for questions if people have them, for sure. But I think what's helpful here is hearing your experience from start to finish, and most importantly, how the students' perceptions changed as you were walking them through each step and giving it to them in small bites. To me, that's a really, really big key into successfully integrating it into the writing process. Because if you give them if you just dump it and say, go for it, you may end up with stuff you don't want. If you give them really specific guidelines, that's going to help them tremendously. Catherine, you had a question?
Yeah, and it's actually more of a comment. You know, Paula Joe, hearing about your experience with this is very valuable. And I think
Thank you.
if others could, I mean, I almost feel like we need to have a way to require faculty to hear it and give it some thoughtful consideration after hearing about, you know, one of our colleagues' real life experience with it, because I think it takes away some of the inaccuracies that many folks have about it. And anyway, I want to thank you for sharing this story with us, because it really is very helpful to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And that's one of the reasons why we really wanted Paula Joe to present with us, because we know that it's so much more valuable to hear it from your colleagues than even from us. I mean, we know we have value, but from your colleagues, it's even more valuable. And what I think Paula Joe really got right on this is that she did it so thoughtfully and with such concern and care for what the results would be. And so my applause to you as well.
Thank you.
Jan.
But I will just say quickly is that, you know, there are faculty out there using AI in their courses. And I actually did reach out to Claudia Martinez, who teaches in the College of Health Sciences in the undergraduate program. She has placed AI in her writing course. And we had multiple conversations over the summer about what she's learned about it and stuff. So I think, you know, there are faculty out there. Maybe we just need to find each other. And Dr. Cooperman, who's my chair, has been instrumental in supporting the use of AI in our program. I mean, he's fully on board with the using AI. So it helps to have those people around surrounding me too, to help me get through this.
Yeah, Jan, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Paula. I want to put one of my papers through. What did you say it was? My essay feedback?
I think it's my essay feedback.
Yeah, my essay
Yeah.
feedback.
I think that would just be fun for us to try.
I was
Yeah.
blown away. I was
Yeah.
blown away when I submitted some of my work to it. Yeah, it's really pretty interesting.
Yeah. And is that something, you know, the other thing about AI, some programs are free and some programs aren't. And you know, I think it would be it'd be interesting to see how it evolves at Rush. Is this something that Rush is going to provide for us as faculty? Or are we going to be like purchasing our own updated chats that, you know, $20 a month, or, you know, where I don't know if my essay feedback is free or not, but you know,
It's
it'll be
free right now, but
Mhm.
undoubtedly the creator is going to want to make money with it at some point.
Yeah.
It's essentially in a beta test. So right now you can have access for free. The other thing is that if faculty want to have tools, they can certainly and should push for those tools in their
Yeah.
colleges. And
Yeah,
so,
I
you know,
think that
just
would be really great. I mean,
yeah, so it's really a question of banding together and getting enough of you to say, we need this tool. And, you know, whatever you guys choose, ultimately, you know, that's up to the colleges.
Yeah,
thanks.
my essay feedback is in beta testing. I'm part of their research. I joined their research about it. And so they're giving me a lot of support. And in fact, Thursday I'm attending a 1-hour session with them, making sure that I know how to use it and walk through it and things like that. And so again, kind of identifying some of these tools early on. There's a lot of great support out there to help us learn how to use them and be part of the process of getting them where they need to be. So
Right. And that's a key point, right? Because you're not just going to pick it up by osmosis. Like you have to actually dig in and use the tools a little bit yourself, a lot yourself, and you'll see which ones rise to the top and which ones sort of fall off. We've got a quick poll for you coming up, and hopefully, can you guys see the poll? Go ahead and start clicking if you would. We have 15 people in the mix. It's a pretty good even split so far. Let me go ahead and stop sharing that, and let's move into Emily Rush, resident
All right.
expert.
All right, don't set me up too much. Thanks, Peg, and thank you, Paula Joe. So what I want to do briefly is move in from some of the applications that we've just talked about, and I'm very, very briefly going to outline a theoretical framework for where we are, or I think where we're headed in terms of this AI-infused landscape in writing. And then I will move on to more practical applications. So I'm going to start by addressing this idea that some of you may have already heard me talk about, and it's this notion of post-plagiarism. Now, it sounds really scary. I'm going to ask you to hang on, and please don't just jump off the call in a moment of panic. I'll try to walk us through it a little bit. But basically, it's this idea that was put forth by noted academic integrity scholar Sarah Eaton. And she's argued that due to the significantly shifting landscape of the way in which we're increasingly writing with the assistance of generative AI tools, that hybrid human AI writing will become much more common. And as a result, it'll be really murky to increasingly distinguish between human and AI generated content. All right, so that's her starting point. If we look at the left side of the screen, she argues that this isn't inherently a bad thing. As Peg noted at the beginning with that reference to scholarship, that there are opportunities to increase creativity with the use of generative AI tools. And there's other scholarship that substantiates that creativity can be increased up to 25%. I won't go into how that's quantified right now. We also see that language barriers can start to disappear. And this is helpful both for scholars working within different languages, but also individuals who might not be writing in their native language. The implications that she mentions on the right side of the screen are significant, though. She stresses that despite this shifting landscape of a post-plagiarism world, that it's essential that humans maintain responsibility in terms of the output that they create, regardless of whether it's human or AI generated. They can't just give up that responsibility. Likewise, that even with this changing approach to AI infused writing, that it becomes essential for individuals to still give proper attribution. At the same time, she argues that increasingly historical definitions of plagiarism will no longer apply. What this means is that in the future, we will probably need to continue to have policy evolution in terms of how do we make adjustments for this new human AI collaborative or hybrid writing, whatever we want to call it, and that in an educational context, which I'll flesh out more in a minute, we'll also probably need to increasingly think about how this informs how we teach our students and their writing practices, as Paula Jo has already addressed. So with that in mind, I want to now turn to the practical about how can AI help improve students' writing? And there are actually a number of ways that it can. Some of Paula Jo's points have already mentioned this, but I'm going to come back to them. So AI can help students improve their writing skills by doing things like giving them personalized and timely feedback. We could nod here to tools like My Essay Feedback that students can use to augment peer feedback or instructor feedback. I also would suggest that AI tools can help students refine their creative and critical thinking. It gives them access to different perspectives and new ideas that might help them make more robust arguments. At the same time, especially if we think about the initial output of generative AI, it's kind of bland. It doesn't really have voice. And so I feel like if students can benefit from reading that kind of writing, it might help them reflect more on the need to develop their own authentic voices and balancing their style with that of the AI system. In addition, as I think it's increasingly important, and there are many studies that are showing that students need to gain experience using AI systems effectively. And I think what's crucial here is that they gain experience while working with someone who's an expert in the field. So for example, Paula Jo guiding her students in how they use AI. She doesn't have to be an expert in AI because she is an expert in the field and she can help them critique the content. And also importantly, AI can help students prepare for the future of work. Numerous studies are saying that AI will play a tremendous role in the workforce in the coming years. Right. So the big question that you might be thinking after the fairly brief discussion of post-plagiarism and some of the points that I made is, how do we permit students to use AI while maintaining an appropriate level of desirable difficulty? This is something we hinted at a little bit in our discussion about why writing is so difficult, that it isn't challenging, but there is a certain level of inherent challenge that we want in the writing process. If it were too easy, well, we don't want it to be too easy. So how do we balance the use of AI while maintaining some level of difficulty that results in student thinking? And let's look at that on the next slide, and we'll explore that a little bit more. So some things that as instructors that I suggest that you might do is, first of all, thinking about how you can emphasize the fact that writing is a process. That's something that many of you talked about yourselves in our brief discussion about why writing is difficult, is that idea of conceptualizing it as a process. So some things that we might do as educators is to help our students build in milestones or ourselves create scaffolding to help reinforce the idea that it's a process and not a caffeine-fueled event the night before a due date. We've also talked about that although there are a variety of AI tools that you can use throughout the writing process, and Peg will tell us more about that in a minute, that we might encourage the use of AI tools for only certain phases or writing tasks. And this is a good chance for maybe you to reflect on your answers that you put in the poll that you did a couple of moments ago. I think it will also be crucial for educators and instructors to model ways to review AI suggestions. I think AI is amazing, but one of the dangers is that it is very confident in its output. And if you're a novice in a field, this can be a little bit overwhelming to think about how to critique that. So that's really something that you all can demonstrate for your students, is how to dissect that and show where it is overconfident, but it's actually perhaps wrong. In the writing process, you might also think about requiring revision plans focused on expanding critical thinking skills. Depending on how much you want to scaffold a task, you can also encourage your students to have a reflective component in which they write about how AI influenced their writing process. And I also highly recommend that you consider creating or using a rubric that addresses AI use in your assignments. And we do have one available. It's in the resources that we'll show at the end of the presentation, and we'll also send out after. All right, how about we move on to the next slide? And I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep us on schedule, so I'm talking a little bit quickly. So what I've done here is I've sort of broken down the writing process into various stages, and this aligns well with the survey that you just took a moment ago. And what I suggest is, if we keep with this idea of approaching writing as a multi-stage process, it can help us tailor our teaching methods to support our students at each stage. And what I'll do just for a few minutes before turning the presentation over to Peg is to talk about some of the ways that AI can help at these different stages. So if we think about the brainstorming and outlining process, we can use AI to sort of jumpstart the creative process by having students brainstorm about their ideas, come up with topics, and maybe begin organizing their thoughts. And I think this is really valuable in thinking about ways that students might overcome the initial hurdles involved in the writing process and sort of the fear of a blank page. A lot of you indicated that your students might have difficulty at the next few stages, so research and exploration, or drafting and revising. So in terms of research and exploration, we can use AI tools to streamline the research phase, which sometimes can take an excessive amount of time that might detract from the writing process. So we can use AI to start gathering resources, references, synthesizing data, and summarizing text. And AI does this very effectively. It can sift through a large amount of information very quickly, And it can then help students create a foundation for moving into the writing and analysis stage. Thinking about drafting and revising, this is really where I prefer to use AI in my own writing. I think that AI's capabilities here are really powerful. So you can use AI to think about how to rephrase a sentence or a section for clarity. I love using AI for refining transitions that I could think about it for an hour, but I could ask AI and it will help me and give me a couple options within, 2 minutes, which is amazing. And I think using AI at this stage can really help students improve their arguments and think about how they convey their message and their argumentation more effectively. And then the last stage is using AI for feedback prior to submission. A few other options that I suggest are, first of all, students can use a reverse outline, and this can help make them ensure that their draft or their paper version aligns with their initial outline if that's important to them. It could also help them just see if the logic and the linear progression of their argument makes sense. And then also, and I have some prompts for this in the resources as well, you can actually use AI to give you feedback on complete drafts. And so we can think of it as sort of an editor or an alternative to a peer review. Now, I would say that the extent that you use AI at these different stages or promote its use might depend on their level of learners. So more novice learners might benefit from using it more at the brainstorming and outlining stage, as well as the review and feedback, whereas your more advanced writers, especially those working on complex topics, might benefit more from using AI at the research and exploration or drafting and revising stages. I don't know, do we have any questions about that before we move on to an exploration of how tools might map onto this kind of conversation?
Okay, we'll keep her moving.
All right.
So Paula Jo, you're going to talk about some of your students' experience, if I'm not mistaken. If we wanted to have a group discussion, we also wanted to talk very briefly about the side effects. I'm going to go into my super fast voice like you hear on TV. By definition, we know that this can be overwhelming. So we wanted to put a plug in there in the middle of all this to remind you to please consult your ID for support, because AI, even just looking at AI is overwhelming in many ways for us as educators and as consumers of the technology. There's just so much information that it can harness, and it can be so quick. And I know for myself, I go down the rabbit hole anyway, right? Never mind AI. But if you give me an AI powered rabbit hole to go down, it's no longer a rabbit hole, it's a rabbit warren. And you can get lost for days in there. So reminding us to segue into which tool you're going to use for which job. So Paula Jo, did you want to add into that? I'm not sure.
Not really. I just wanted to make sure that people realize that this is just like you might be feeling overwhelmed by all this information. Your students are equally overwhelmed by all this information. The cognitive load that you're placing on your students by incorporating AI, you just have to be really aware of that. And again, just start small, just start very, very small,
Right. As we were preparing for this, we all made the comment that even if you do one thing, just one thing in one course, in one unit, in one assignment, that's still one more thing that you didn't have before. So, if you're not comfortable yet with scaffolding your assignments and incorporating several different elements of AI into your course, just do one and just introduce the idea. Because eventually, as Emily stated earlier, this is going to be a part of the workforce going forward. This is not something that they're going to use to cheat on their courses and then never use again. I've said this 100 times before, but it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's the people that know AI and how to use AI that are going to take your job. So this is where you want to prepare your students going into the workforce, that this is something that they need to understand and understand well. as do we. So moving forward, basically, again, following the same pattern that we had on the poll and in Emily's slide, some of the tools that we can use, and I'm not going to go into each and every one of them, but we have Claude, we have ChatGPT, we have Bing, and those are really preferred for ideation and brainstorming and outlining. And by the way, I'm preparing a document. It's not quite ready yet, but I'm preparing a document that's got all the tools that we've mentioned in this workshop that we're going to send out with the letter afterwards. So, and that's going to go out to all of you hopefully in the next day or two. So I'm not going to try to go through all of these tools in this session because we have 9 minutes and that would just overwhelm people. For review and feedback, we recommend Claude and ChatGPT. For feedback on drafts, again, Claude versus ChatGPT. ChatGPT, the free version is, I think, 3.5. It's adequate for most of what we do, but if you go up to version 4, which is the paid version, it does have a higher suite of accuracy and it's got better referencing capabilities. So, it's up to you. I like Claude a lot. I just started using Claude. I'd been using 3.5 and I switched over to Claude based on Emily's recommendation. And yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good.
Claude too, now that Emily introduced me to it.
Emily pointed out in the chat that for those that want an intro or refresher about generative AI tools, we're going to do another hands-on workshop on December 12th. And that's going to really walk through the tools more. So we haven't forgotten that some of you haven't even seen these tools yet or may want a refresher. So moving on to the drafting and revising, Emily recommends Quillbot, Claude, Trinka AI, or PaperPal. And Paula Jo mentions that she doesn't require any of her students to use paid versions. I feel very strongly that until the university endorses one or the other, we should not be buying paid versions of things for use in our classes, because that by definition may require the student to buy it as well. And I'm not a fan. They have enough to deal with. So, and then refining transitions, Claude or ChatGPT, modifying text, same tools, Quillbot added in for fun. And then we have research and exploration and content development. I haven't even used some of these tools, I'll be honest with you. I've looked at Consensus, I've looked at Perplexity, I've looked at Semantic Scholar, Claude GPT, ChatGPT, Scholarcy, Explain Paper, AudioPen. All of these will be, again, on a document that we're going to provide for you. Research Rabbit is fun. Research Rabbit goes out basically and just gathers everything that you need for a literature review and allows you to set it up. So that's really a fun tool to use as well. At the end of the day, you can find an AI for almost anything you want to do. So if you're ever looking for, hey, can I use an AI for this? Go and look, because chances are it's out there. Chances are somebody's developed it. Chances are somebody's implemented. Just be careful to, use your own discretion and test drive it. We can't recommend that enough. You've got to go out, you've got to test drive, you've got to see if it brings back results that you as the subject matter experts are comfortable with. You have to go out and review it both from your perspective as an educator, but also from your students' perspective as a user. They have a lot less foundational knowledge to be able to determine whether or not the sourcing is good than you do. So just be mindful of that distinction as you're looking at different tools. And another piece that we're building is we have a rubric that we're building for faculty to be able to review different AIs. So the last thing that we're going to talk about in our 4 or 5 minutes that we have left is we're going to come back to that question, and hopefully you guys can pop in and answer. Given the information that we've talked about today, does it help you to think of new ideas, new ways that you can use this in your courses? And I'd love it if people would come off their mic or put it in the chat, because really the goal of this workshop was just to get the wheels turning and get you thinking about how you could use these tools, not necessarily which tools you should use. So thoughts on that?
Hi, I'm Terry Gerlowski. I work with Ann.
Hi,
I found this really informational. Because
good.
I was not even sure where to even, I just thought AI was just one big blob out there, one black hole and to realize how many different options there are out there. I'm gonna take this and do some research on my own
Good
and
for
see.
you.
Yeah, no, yeah, this was really good. It took the scariness away from it because I just thought it was all like the students, that it's all bad. You're
Yeah,
cheating. And
yeah.
it's not, it's a tool. So and to stay a step ahead of students and be able to provide them resources or to calm their nerves or to tell them about it. No, this was good. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm so happy. I think you just made all of our hearts swell with pride that we were able to convert you. I mean, that's absolute music to our ears because that's exactly the goal of these workshops is to take that fear factor away and get people to understand that it's just another tool in the toolbox, right?
Yeah,
I mean, 10 years
cool.
ago, they didn't do, or 20 years ago, they didn't do robotic surgery. Now it's on the cutting edge and everybody's doing it for everything. So,
Right.
the same thing applies in education as it does in healthcare. There's constant innovations.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you. I want to come to more, so I appreciate this. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I think that wraps us up for today. We do have some resources we're going to send you, and we have some closing thoughts and ideas that we're going to pull together. We've got the rubric that we're planning. We've got more workshops that we've got going on. Emily and Paula Joe, do you guys want to jump in with any last thoughts? I'm going to put if you have time and wish to put any of those good thoughts in writing, here's you can do a feedback survey for us. We've either got a QR code or we'll send the link out as well. But if you want to do it right now with a QR code on your phone, we can do that. Otherwise, thank you for listening. And we are ending up with 2 minutes for conversation to spare. And
Yeah,
I love this comment that Paula Joe just put in the chat. Students need structure just like a child learning something new. It is our responsibility to give them that structure.
yeah, I would end with, we're here to support each other as faculty. None of us should feel like we're out there swimming alone. I reach out to myself or to the, city, or there's other faculty that are using AI. And the other thing is just start small. I mean, don't get, and again, it's not a crisis. This
Yeah.
thought it was initially. I just feel like, oh, it's just AI. I got time to figure this out, and I've got time. And you really do, because there are students who are using it, but you have time to pull them in and to give them that structure that they need. So that would be my closing thing. Just start small.
Perfect. Emily, a closing thought?
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think what Paula Joe said is exactly accurate. So lean on your colleagues, reach out to city, try not to be overwhelmed.